So my number two is The Third Man from 1949. This is a film directed by Carol Reed, starring Joseph Cotton, Alida Valli, and Orson Welles. The plot summary: pulp novelist Holly Martins travels to shadowy post-war Vienna, only to find himself investigating the mysterious death of an old friend, Harry Lime. So this is a film for me that did sort of two things. I saw this again for the first time in high school, and it immediately this was like my favorite movie, honestly, for several years of all time. I just immediately was entranced by this,
Oh, wow.
and it got me to deep dive into film noir, which is now one of my favorite genres, and also get deeper into just classic cinema from the 30s and 40s. So I'd seen, the big major works of classic cinema, and obviously I'd seen Citizen Kane at this point. But Citizen Kane, and we talked about that in a previous episode on films that shape my love of film. Citizen Kane, even to this day, whenever I see it, feels like it was made yesterday. Like, it is the most
Yeah.
modern. It's so modern. This movie feels like a movie that was made in 1949. It feels like a classic film. So sort of me embracing that and those aesthetics and the pace of these movies and how they were put together and the acting styles helped me just be able to go and explore more of those films. Versus you see Kane and you watch another movie from that same year, it'll be nothing like Kane because there's nothing like Citizen Kane. But this movie helped me kind of explore more of that type of classic Hollywood, which is one of my favorite periods in film history. So I'll kind of pause there and I'll talk more about it, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on this film and if you'd seen it before.
Yeah, I had seen it before. Absolutely loved it. And this is obviously one of those classic masterpieces, like you mentioned. I will say, though, that I guess my entry into film noir, from what I can remember, is through
Mm-hmm.
Hitchcock.
Mm,
So it's hard to, and then kind of obviously watching other movies of the 40s and such, Gaslight or
mm-hmm.
what have you,
Like at
Mildred
Sunset Boulevard,
Pierce and
Mildred
Sunset
Pierce. Yeah,
Boulevard. We've
right.
covered a lot of those movies on the podcast. The pacing of this one and the storytelling of this one does stand out for sure. And especially on this rewatch, obviously the cinematography and the mood of it is mesmerizing for sure. There's
Incredible. Yeah.
nothing that can beat that. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
this movie is a crowning achievement in that sense. I will say that the plot of it and maybe the acting styles of it and just like the pacing and the rhythm of it, that's the part that you have to be in the right headspace to
Mm.
kind of fully take it in, I think, as opposed to your other 40s noir film, which is maybe even corny at times, but there's something about that corn that you eat it up.
Mm.
Versus this movie, you have to sort of kind of give all of it, give all of yourself to it to fully enjoy it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a mystery where the whole movie, or not the whole movie, like 75% of it, Joseph Cotton's character is looking for his friend who may or may not be
Mm-hmm.
dead, trying to investigate his murder. So there's a mystery element that isn't as cut and dry as like, oh, there's a private eye, so a woman comes in, says do this, and then he goes and tries to investigate what's going on. So it is a lot. It's just a different type of I
It's a
think I
mood
think film
piece.
noir. It's a mood piece, and to your point on just the cinematography, I mean that is what immediately like sucked me in, and even to this day when I watch, especially the two scenes just really stand out to me. One is the initial reveal of Orson Welles in the film
Mm-hmm.
because you think he might be dead. Orson Welles is in
Mm-hmm.
the movie. I'm like, where is he? When I saw it the first time, I was like, hey, wait, he's not the main character. This is crazy. It's Orson Welles. And then when he shows up as Harry Lime, he's in the shadows, and then there's a light that
It's
turns
a
on,
gasp
and then all of a
moment.
sudden, like you see his face, and he has this really like wry smile, and the camera zooms in, and then the light shuts off, and he disappears. And it's just one of the most amazing introductions to
Totally.
a character on screen. Is just incredible. And then the sequence when he goes, there's a famous chase in the sewers, and some
Mm-hmm.
of those shots I'm still to this day just in awe of. Wow, like the lighting
How
and
did they
the
do it?
wow, it just looks so beautiful when you see this like long sort of dark corridor, but there's a light at the end, and there's the shadows of people running around. And it just, even again to this day, I'm just in awe of what that is. And that is classic film noir tropes. And not that this is at all the first film noir film. I mean, the genre had existed before this, but for me it was my introduction into it, because at this time the Hitchcock films I were watching in high school were the classic Vertigo
Mm-hmm.
and North Northwest. I hadn't gone back yet to see the earlier Hitchcock, which he dealt a
Mm-hmm.
lot of film noir, and that was not till college I was seeing those films. So this was like my film noir introduction, and my introduction more to loving the 30s and 40s and 50s
Mm-hmm.
films. They're just and the score. I want to call that out too. Just that zither score. I listen to it quite often. I have the soundtrack, and it's so great. I love the score to this movie. So unique too for that time, and it really puts you in a, speaking of transportive, you know, that time and place of post-war Vienna. I mean, they also intercut a lot of real footage,
Mm-hmm.
and they shot it there, and it's still,
Right.
there's rubble in the background. I mean, this is just right post World War II. This was being made, and it feels like it. You really feel like you're in this
Amazing.
shadowy, you don't really, there's no morality. There's all these gray areas. There's a lot of crime, that underground crime, and people are sort of okay with it, and all the different nations that were owning the different parts of the city. I mean, you really are
Mm-hmm.
transported in the same way that Wings of Desire. I felt like, okay, now I feel like what Berlin is like in the 80s. I definitely feel like what Vienna is like in the 40s after
Yeah.
watching this movie.
Totally agree. And I love kind of the cacophony of like languages and different kinds of people. Like you said, everything is in the gray. I
Yeah.
love all of that. The score is very interesting. I'm curious. I'm sure there's like volumes spoken and written about that. What do you think is the purpose of this score?
I think it captures the 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 mood of the city in a positive way. Like it's very upbeat,
Mm,
sort of zither
yeah,
music, and the rest of the movie is sort of showing Vienna as this, you know, broken city where there's all this
yeah.
crime and all these like post World War II sort of morality kind of setting in. And I think what it does is remind people that this is one of the world's greatest cities, and there's still a lot of positive things in Vienna, and the city is still carrying on in the same way. It's not broken. It's still just the magical jewel of Europe that it was even before the war. I've not been to Vienna, but it looks like just a totally magical
It's
place. And for me,
beautiful. Yeah.
it's adding that layer in where, yeah, this is obviously, the city's gone through a lot. So is Europe, but there's still the, you know, the culture and the heart and the soul of the positive aspects of Vienna. And then you could also say like Europe as well, which was devastated after the war, but it's down, but wasn't out in that sense culturally. At least
Mhm.
that's how I interpret that. But yeah, I'm sure there are, again, this movie is, I've read several books on this film, so I'm sure there's a lot of people that have their own opinions on that score, but that's at least what it represents to me. It's the contrast between the darkness of the story and the darkness of the actual film, because it is a film noir, but there's that levity there, which is, you know, the spirit of Vienna or something. That's how do you interpret it, and what did you think it was?
That makes sense, actually. I mean, it's obviously very fun and enjoyable, and I would listen to it on its own as well.
Yeah.
I did find it distracting
Oh,
at,
really?
at
Okay.
times because of the contrast of it.
Mm.
Because there is all this stuff happening. Somebody is dead, and mostly bad to gray to bad things are happening throughout the movie, and the score almost makes you feel the other way. And at some
Mm-hmm.
point, the score is also kind of jovial and silly at
Mm-hmm.
times as well. And sometimes it's kind of heartwarming and fun, but sometimes it's also used as a device to increase the paranoia. Because if it
Mm.
starts to play over and over again, it starts to kind of, grate on you a little bit. And that also feels very purposeful. So
Mm.
I don't know. I almost feel like I want to watch it again, this movie, and pay more attention to the score as opposed
Mm.
to the cinematography, which is obviously the main thing you notice.
Yeah.
But this time the score kind of unsettled me. But maybe that is the point, is
Right.
that it doesn't almost fit in the movie. This is not a fun movie, and the score is kind of opposite. But maybe you're right. That's probably one interpretation that is trying to underline the jewel and the joy of this city, what it used to be, or maybe what it can be, even
Mm-hmm.
after all that's happened. Or is it just there to kind of mess your head up a little bit? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. No, that's a, yeah. Now I want to actually go and find some writings and
Hmm.
analysis of the score now. I'm gonna definitely gonna go do that after this. One other thing actually I want to call out too is that before I'd seen this movie, which again I saw this in high school, I think I just read about it, and oh, I know I was at the library just noticing the cover of the DVD. I'm like, Orson Welles, I'm just gonna get this, and just rented it and watched it. But there was a cartoon in the 90s, spin-off of another cartoon Animaniacs called Pinky and the Brain. And there's an episode of this show that I remember is literally like a retelling of this whole movie, but for kids, essentially, with two
Oh.
like a mice and a rat are sort of playing the two main roles. And it just, in a weird way, like I remember seeing this for the first time, being like, this feels like I've seen this movie before. Like something about it was like familiar to me. And then I realized like, oh my God, it was from this kid's cartoon. And it just did remind me of so much. And I think we actually talked about this on a previous episode where so many of these old like Warner Brothers cartoons, but this was from the 90s, even in the 90s, for kids would like use classic either film storylines, make allusions to them, or use parodies of different famous Hollywood actors and things. And it just sort of puts you in where you feel all this stuff feels more familiar, even though there's a movie that was made like 40 years ago. But as a kid, you're sort of absorbing it through these other kids' cartoons. And it's just something where I just wonder today if these cartoons are doing things like this, because I think it's an important way to kind of get kids into film or just familiar with these old stars or plot lines. Or I mean, literally it's like 10 minutes. You can watch it on YouTube. It's the same basic plot of this, where like Pinky goes and tries to find the brain, who's the Orson Welles character, and it's in black and white. They're trying to crib all the the style of it, and it's just cool that is sort of subconsciously my introduction to this movie was that cartoon. I didn't even realize it until I saw the movie. Like, wait a second, this feels familiar. I just think that's a really cool thing that the animators were doing, again, even way back when with the Warner Brothers cartoons. Just a cool thing.
That's amazing. Now I want to go and check that out.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a fun little short. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.